And now Zoom just populated for no good reason. Okay, you are live from Mount Shasta. And now Zoom just populated for no good reason. No. Okay, you are live from Mount Shasta. And now Zoom just populated for no good reason. No. I don't know. Okay, you are live from Mount Shasta. And now Zoom just populated for no good reason. No. I don't know. Okay, you are live from Mount Shasta. And now Zoom just populated for no good reason. No. I don't know. Okay, you are live from Mount Shasta. Okay, it's muted.
We're live. Welcome, everyone. This is Toltec Discussions with Golden Eagle live from the studios at the Coalition to continue attempting to waking up those who are capable, better known as Mount Shasta. So, the theme tonight is what's next. So what do I mean by what's next? I mean, I spent the last year discussing about the basic philosophies of Toltec consciousness and the things in the world that should hopefully key you that there's a waking up process that's supposed to occur if humanity is to achieve its true potential. So this whole thing is really just talking about the potential of humanity, the future of humanity. Thank you, ma'am. Oh, yeah, much better. And what this entails is some cold hard look at the facts of the world. You have to take a look at yourself. You have to take a look at everyone around you. You have to take a look at what's being said as well as what isn't being said. And you have to be proactive at finding your information from sources other than the government Bureau of Propaganda, otherwise known as mainstream media. Know that everything that appears in the mainstream media is choreographed disinformation. So you have to go elsewhere. So that summarizes the last year of what I've been trying to teach. And now the question is, what's next? What's our next step? In a blog that I just published, I'm talking about the fact that saving the world is not a part-time job. There is a key shift in your awareness, in your consciousness, that needs to happen, which is saving the world is your number one priority, your number one full-time job. Anything else that you do is simply to support you, to support your physical body, your physical machine, your family, while you do this other work. Even if the process of supporting yourself and your family is a 40-hour-a-week job or more, that's your part-time job. Your full-time job is saving humanity. The days when you could go off for a one-week retreat once a year and have a wonderful spiritual experience and Mount Shasta or Sedona, Arizona, or wherever. And then that was your spiritual thing. And over the course of the next year, you could read 2 or 3 books, go to a video, maybe go to a weekend seminar or 2, and then the rest of the time it was back to the usual grind. And you got your 1 to 2 weeks of total spiritual life. The rest of the time, you'd get those week here, week there things, and those days are gone. There's a lot going on in humanity. Welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
That's your water there, Patricia.
Thank you.
So there's just a lot going on. The world is changing. The fabric of the space-time continuum is changing. Human consciousness is changing, the human collective consciousness. And that is a natural process. Unfortunately, all those things I mentioned earlier are being done in, the show of corporate media is intended to trick you. A couple weeks ago we were talking about The Wizard of Oz, what's up on stage versus the man behind the curtain. And so that's what we're dealing with. And you, if you're going to really do your true will, accomplish what you came here to do, you have to make that your full-time job. Otherwise, you're going to fail. And I know that's blunt, but that's the way it is. You have to crave success in the accomplishment of your true will the way you crave oxygen or food or water. You need to crave doing something to further your skills, your abilities, and your progress on your spiritual path every bit as much as you crave that next meal, that next breath. Because if you don't, you will fail. If enough people fail, then humanity fails. The survival of the human race depends on it. So no pressure, right? Back in the olden days when I worked in corporate environments, there was an old adage that was bandied about that basically said, you continue to work the job you have as if that was going to be your job forever, knowing full well that it probably wasn't. And that maybe in parallel with that, you're getting more education, you're going to night school, you're sending out resumes, you're contacting headhunters looking for that perfect job, the next perfect job. But you manage that as if that was your permanent full-time job. And so that's how you have to manage this lifetime. You need to manage it as if you're going to have this body forever. Or at least until you accomplish what you came here to do. So, hopefully, the last year has gotten your attention. I hope. And so now that's the next $64,000 question is, what's next? So what's next? Serious question. What do you think is next?
Level 4, I think, is next for me.
That's a good answer. It's not the only answer, but it's a good answer. You can't give the answer she just gave. What's your answer?
Will true. No, I'm just kidding. Divine will.
Yes. And what's the step to get you there?
Save humanity.
Well, that's the long-term goal, yeah. What's next?
Well, I'd like to try to answer your clarification question to her.
Okay.
Before you can do your true will, you have to have a knowledge of and conversation with Holy Guardian Angel.
Okay.
So that would be, if you don't know your will, that would be the next step on that.
Okay.
So you set up a lot of information, so it's hard to say what's next. You're talking about saving humanity and the work that we've already been doing. So it could go probably a lot of different ways.
What I was most looking for is commitment.
Mm.
You have to commit yourself to this. You have to consecrate every breath of your life, your entire life force, to doing this work. It's commitment. I know there's probably men out there watching who are really scared by that commitment word. But if you're afraid of that C word with respect to relationships, you need to get over it in a hurry, because the quality of the relationship when you commit to doing your true will, to doing the great work, is much, much higher. You have to be all in. Not that it's a great example culturally, but when Cortez landed in Mexico at the place we now call Veracruz, I can't remember the exact number, he had like 7 ships. He sent 1 ship back to Cuba that said, pick us up in 3 years. And then the other 6, he lined up all his army, every one of his people on the shore, and made them watch as he burned all his ships.
That's commitment.
So the message was clear. You either succeed in this venture or we all die. So yeah, that's commitment. And burning your ships has become the analogy, and it goes back to Cortez, who was, whether he accepted it or not, the incarnation of Quetzalcoatl, who had returned to end human sacrifice. Unfortunately, he brought the Catholic Church with him. So,
Oh yes.
and in addition to any human sacrifice, they burned all the records, which was unfortunate. Who's online?
Melody.
Hi, Melody.
And Maria is the only other one logged on.
Only one so far. Okay.
It does say there's 3 people watching, 5 people watching now.
So she's in
Okay.
there. I'm gonna go sit here.
A request for those of you watching is, if you would like to participate in the chat, ask questions, I welcome them, but you have to log in. And that means you use your YouTube account or your Gmail account, and then that does let us see who you are, and we can talk to you by name. So,
And also to like our page.
I was just going to say that, isn't she good? We're trying to get up to 100 likes on this YouTube channel. So please like our page, especially if you haven't already. And then all sorts of wonderful things happen in terms of YouTube search and a whole bunch of other cool things. So please, whether you like what I have to say or whether you hate what I have to say and only log in to make fun of me, that's okay. I'm cool with that. But please like our page. That's what's important. So it's this idea that you have to be all in. That's what's next. And so I'm going to challenge you all, you who are in the room, you who are down the hall watching online, you who are out there in the ethers all over the world. I'm going to challenge you to evaluate your life and keep a detailed record for the next 2 weeks of how much time you spend on what activities. How much time do you spend watching television? How much time do you spend hanging out in bars or restaurants with friends? How much time do you spend reading something of importance? How much time do you spend improving yourself in any way, going to museums, having fun, going out and doing something specifically for fun. Fun is a frequency. And the brainwave frequencies that fun induce are very therapeutic, very healing, and very rejuvenating. And they clear out the brainwave frequencies induced by stress. So that's why kids love to play. And that's why they don't have any stress until they get up to the or age 4 or 5, and mommy and daddy are trying to push them to learn to read or write and do calculus before they get into first grade so that they can get into the right preschool and the right high school and the right college to have the right career, to raise more stressed out kids to do the same. So kids are beautiful, amazing creatures we could all learn from. We're so connected. Keep that record. And as you go, make a note. In addition to just the number of hours spent on different activities, sleep, eating, and see where you could, if your excuse for not doing your true will is, oh, I don't have enough time, and I'm offering that out as a hypothetical, theoretical example, only because I've heard it dozens and dozens of times. Oh, there's just no time. Look at how much time you spend watching television. How much time you spend surfing the internet. How much time do we spend on Facebook, scrolling by, looking for that one key post that's going to change our life? And all of those activities are perfectly fine if you're doing them with an intent. So if you want to get online and say, I need to look up some information, write down on a piece of paper, I am getting online to fill in the blank. And write the time down. And get online, do your searches, look for your images, look for your websites, whatever it is you're looking for, and then log off. Write the time down. And then 2 hours later, when you figure out, oh shoot, I'm still online, I still haven't done this, just write it down as, oh, that was a break in my attention. Spent 2 hours on Facebook, didn't search for what I want, and then search for what you want. That's an example of the kind of rigor it takes to make those next quantum leaps in your consciousness. There's a lot of protests going on in the world, and this is a natural phase that societies go through when their needs aren't being met and their freedoms are being taken away. Unfortunately, it sometimes has to get really bad before people take action.
Sorry.
Say again?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, okay. When it gets bad enough, then there's protests. And if you judge by the number of protests out there, people are really upset. People are really angry at each other. But you're going to also observe that for every protest on one side of an issue, there's an equal protest on the other side of the issue, which gives the appearance that people are really divided. And if that was truly the case, then there's a lot happening and a lot coming to a head. But the reality is a lot of those protests aren't being managed as a grassroots ground-up effort. They're paid professionals organizing these protests and getting a few people to just have to show up for a day, wave a sign and scream for an hour and then go home. And then they feel good because they protested. And then they go back to the same life they did before. They don't make any changes. And life goes on. And you have to understand that many, many, many of those protests are being choreographed by the paid power people, or the power people behind the scenes, who are the equivalent of puppet masters jerking the strings of the politicians, and it's being done specifically as photo ops for mainstream media. There's a lot of different examples of that if you go search online. People taking photos of all the people injured in war. And then right next to it, there's a photo of the supposed war victim standing there with his arms around his two rescuers posing. They're in costume. It's all staged. And lots of those. They're being paid to protest for the reason of creating division. You'll find online tons of pictures of a black child next to a white child, a Jewish child next to an Arab child, playing and smiling and having their arms around each other. They're best friends. They don't learn to hate each other until they get bigger and are told, oh, no, you can't play with little Ahmed. He's going to grow up and be a terrorist. And little Ahmed goes, oh, you can't play with little Ishmael. He's going to grow up and be a Jew, and he's going to try to kill you. Kids don't naturally gravitate towards hate. They gravitate towards love. It takes a lot to change that. And when you think back on all the social programming we use, from the time we get kids into school, all the way through school, adulthood, the evening news, the newspapers, all the hidden assumptions. So Buckminster Fuller, you've heard me talk of him, says you're never going to fix a problem by trying to fix a problem. You fix the problem by creating a new model that makes the old method obsolete. So if you're going to commit to saving the world, you're going to commit to being all in on your personal practice. It's like, where do we go then? What's next? What's next is we have to change the world. We need to change the world in a way that creates a world that matches the potential we have right now if we don't invent a single other invention that's 100 times better than the world that we have. It's the type of world we wish we had been born into. If we can create that kind of world, then think what kind of legacy that's going to be. Think what kind of legacy it will be when the people who are kids now grow up and they can put all their time into the evolution of humanity, into the spiritual work. When everyone who is being born naturally has every psychic and spiritual and physical ability that we now consider to be superhuman. And that becomes the new baseline. What could humanity accomplish? No war, because why fight? Everybody's got all the energy we need. Everybody's got all the food we need. Everybody can have whatever kind of career they want. We've educated everyone. Everyone's aware of the spiritual truths of the universe. Every bit of that represents a piece of knowledge that we know right now. Free energy devices are there. Levitating hovercraft, the Jetsons cars, as I like to call them, are invented right now. We're just not allowed to have them. I read an article in the last couple of weeks. It's been 2 weeks since we had a discussion because we had Thanksgiving and travel and classes in Oregon and classes here last weekend and shamanic events and all this kind of thing. So it's been 2 weeks. The Jetsons cars. I want a Jetsons car. If you've ever spent time stuck in traffic, rush hour traffic, you want a Jetsons car.
Mm-hmm.
Jetsons car, one of my pet peeves, it's not first on my list to fix if I were king for a day, but it's in the top 10, maybe even 2 or 3, is speed bumps.
Mm.
Speed bumps in parking lots, speed bumps on roads. It's ridiculous. It is the antithesis of trying to increase the efficiency of traffic flow. The speed bumps. So speed bumps are going to go out. But Jetsons cars make them obsolete. Yeah, Jetson cars, nobody's going to care about speed bumps. Like, eh. That's what's available right now. And then can you imagine what might be invented, what might be brought through, what the potential could be if everyone alive stopped fighting? Just stop it. Before we started tonight, the subject came up of something I've shared before, which is the video of a skit from, I don't even remember which sitcom it was, or variety show it was. The skit involves Bob Newhart.
Saturday Night Live.
I don't think it was SNL. It might have been Mad TV, but I think it was another one. And the skit is called "Stop It." And I'll just let you go watch. Go to YouTube, type in Bob Newhart "Stop It," and you'll find it. The gist of it is, no matter what reason, no matter what rationalization there is for any kind of human behavior, if you want to change and we want to move beyond that, we just have to stop it, whatever the old way is. So fighting, wars over trumped up reasons, stop it. Doesn't matter who's in office. We're still fighting the same war that started in 2001. That's 17 years ago. More than 17 years. We've been fighting a war against a vague, non-existent enemy. We've been fighting this non-existent enemy, and then when we win the war, it's like, well, shoot, we weren't supposed to win that fast. We need a new enemy. Let's make up another one out of thin air. They just raided an ISIS compound in the Middle East, in Syria, I think it was. And guess what they found? This is in an ISIS compound. All their weapons were made in the USA. True story. Go look it up. Go verify everything I'm saying. We created ISIS out of thin air to justify an ongoing continuous war. This is right out of the playbook called 1984. Has everybody obtained 1984 and started reading?
Do we have a video?
I don't know how good any of the movies. I think there's been 1 or 2 made. This is one where I recommend reading. Celestine's Prophecy was one I recommend the movie over the book. This is one I recommend the book. I know I've seen at least one back in the day that was really kind of lousy.
Should we prioritize it over our required reading list?
Oh no, finish your required reading list this week and then you can go on to 1984 next week.
Okay.
Remember, we were challenged to finish our reading by the end
By
of the
the end
year.
of the year. I'm still trying. Except I don't have Coyote.
Coyote's book.
You don't have it.
But if I finish everything else, that would be pretty good.
Melody has the one that we lent. I wonder how far she hasn't gotten very far.
She just got it the week before
Yes,
the fire,
Yeah,
so she hasn't done.
hasn't done anything
Yeah.
with it.
Well, just start emailing Coyote.
Everybody online who's watching, everybody who's here in the room or in the house, send an email to Coyote. They're working on it. Just so you know, but be very respectful and appreciative of the work they're doing. They're in the process of trying to close on a piece of property they found.
Nice.
And they're going to need to raise some money before, I think, the 10th of December, the last piece of money. And if anyone was thinking of any kind of a donation, or knows anyone who would want to make a donation to help further the great work in general and the Toltec work in particular, this would be a good time to donate money to Coyote's project. Anything else? It's not small, but it's not large. It's not that much more they need. So this would be a good time. So they've been busy. They've been moving and doing this and doing that. They're doing their work. And so it'll happen. I don't think that they'll have the book into print by the end of the year, but soon. So talk to me afterwards. I may be able to help you out another way. So it's not a question of is it more important. They're all important. They're all important. There's a lot of issues out there in society, in the world right now. And most of them are important. But they are really all the same issue. They are really the issue of an assault on our intelligence by people who assume that we won't notice. And the core issue is interesting. The core issue isn't what you think it is. Unless you're very astute or you pick up what I'm thinking right now. The core, no matter what you're thinking, I'm going to bet that it's not what you think it is. The core issue is the lie that we have all been told by every religion, every government in recent memory that says we are physical beings attempting to have a spiritual experience. When instead the opposite is true. We are spiritual beings attempting to have a physical experience. And that lie is crucial because it denies us the truth of our very existence. The world, there's a great movement to become more secular, to deny God, to deny spirituality. We've been declared to be smart mud that somehow conspired to create fast food restaurants and reality TV. And don't look at that behind that curtain because there's nothing there. There's no spiritual world to find. Let's just all be these good little secularists and work for Big Brother and do whatever the talking head says. That's the great lie. And part of that is that we've been told to believe that we are limited. We have been told We can't. There's times in my life when if I heard the phrase, we can't do that, one more time, I swear I was going to slap somebody. I don't care who I slap, I'm going to slap somebody. What we should be told is we can. We have no limits. And no matter what the propaganda out there is, it's trying to convince us that the current course for humanity can't be changed. And that course as set by the puppet masters and the secularists who have an agenda, which I'll talk about in a minute. But that course, that's it, you can't change it. What do you mean I can't change it? Of course we can change it. But if enough people believe that propaganda, they won't try. So we've had prophets and shamans throughout the history of the world telling us exactly the opposite, that we have no limits. Anything Christ can do, we can do better. And that's not us saying that, that was him saying that. I'll wait till she's back for the homework I'm about to give. We don't have any limits. This solid world is not solid. It's energy, it's a frequency, it's a waveform. It's created as a holographic projection as the energy moves through us, interacts with our brain, and the specific brain cells that we have that generate laser light, coherent light, that makes a holographic projection. And the world as we know it is the combined holographic projections of all the people. We agree on this reality. So, in theory, we can change this world as easily as we change the channel on the TV. We need a critical mass, a critical people projecting the new world into the human collective consciousness. That's what the Toltec work can do. That's why the Toltec work has been suppressed. In part, it's why the Toltec work was deliberately held hidden until just before the end of the Great Age. Gatun, as it's called in the Mayan calendar, which in reality was a copy of the Toltec calendar that the Spaniards took back to Spain and melted because it was pure gold. And gold was much more important to pay for building warships to fight a losing war against England than it was to uplift humanity. Nothing much has changed in the last 500 years. Yeah, Spain went, this is interesting historical factoid. They were the king of the world after they had found the New World and claimed all this territory and had all this gold. Then they fell on hard times.
I was going to say, weren't they also almost bankrupt, and that's part of the reason for some of the expeditions?
Yeah. The big problem with Spain is they didn't listen to engineers when it came to how to design ships. They listened to priests.
Oh boy.
That'll
It's lucky
show
you
'em.
even floated in it.
What's that?
Yeah.
I said that'll show them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They built a type of vessel known as a galleon, which was big, bulbous, and very ornate, and they cost a fortune to build. And they were about the most unseaworthy vessel you could imagine. They were made out of the wrong kind of wood for sailing in tropical waters, which is mostly where they came to in Americas, which left them susceptible to a lot of the worms that would attack the wood here in these ships. For the cost of 1 galleon that had a lifespan of 3 years,
Just 3?
because these worms would rot the wood away and then the whole bottom would fall out. So, but for the cost of one of those galleons, it was made to be ornate and to be worthy of carrying this gold back to the popes. They had to have these big ornate things. For the cost of that one, they could have fielded a small fleet of smaller, more seaworthy, more maneuverable vessels, and each one of those ships could have carried about a quarter of what a galleon could carry. So they would have, for the same money, they could have carried 2 to 3 times as much stuff on vessels that weren't prone to running aground. They were more maneuverable in bad weather. They timed a lot of their voyages based on the calendar as determined by the church, not on storm season. So they repeatedly tried to sail these big, unmaneuverable, unseaworthy galleons into hurricanes.
And half of them are on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean.
There was, when I was living in Florida, they found one. It was the one that Mel Fisher had spent 20 years looking for because of how much gold it had on it when it went down. And it was called the Atocha. Nuestra Senora de Atocha something. The Atocha was the name. And when that sank, that basically caused a ripple throughout Europe because of the loss of all that money. It was the equivalent of like a 10-year depression because that one ship sank. And they lost hundreds of galleons over the several hundred-year period. A quarter, at least, of the gold that left the New World headed to Spain didn't make it.
Wow.
Now you know why those Florida treasure hunters were running around like crazy. So that was the problem, is that they didn't learn. They didn't think.
And they listened to the priest. That's another problem.
They listened to priests who weren't trained as shipmakers or sea captains. So in terms of all these issues facing the world, that was kind of a segue to wait till you got back. I have some new homework because reading your assigned reading and practicing all your drills isn't enough. So now you have to read 1984, and now you get to do something else. Is you're going to pick an issue. It could be the environment, it could be vaccinations, it could be nutrition, it could be women's rights, it could be immigrant rights, it could be gay rights, it could be whatever issue floats your boat, no pun intended. Make sure that it is a worthwhile issue of importance to humanity. And you're going to start promoting an alternative. You're not going to wage a protest against the existing model. You're going to follow Buckminster Fuller's formula, and you're going to replace the old model with a new one that's better. There can't be anything in your approach that is anti what is going on now. How you do this is entirely up to you, but you have to take it public. You can write, you can get articles published in newspapers or journals or magazines. You could blog. That's probably the least expensive way to start getting out, and then promote your blog on Facebook or other social media. You could do artwork. You could write a play and try to get it produced. It doesn't matter. But you're going to do it with an intent to create a new model. And this is a long-term, ongoing thing. This isn't like, do this by next week and then you're done. This needs to be ongoing. This needs to be, when you commit to changing the world, this has to be an issue you're willing to go to bat for and change the world, literally change the world. So spend some time thinking about it. You don't have to decide this before you go home. You don't have to have a decision on what the issue is you're going to work on by tomorrow. You know. But this is what we need to do if we're going to get serious about changing the world.
This is so important. Because we can't have a new paradigm working on an old model. We can't go into a new system in unity consciousness doing things the same old way.
Right. What she said. That was good.
And we have to do more than think about it.
Yeah, we have to start putting it into action.
Everyone has to do this. This is what this school is doing. And there will quite possibly be times when we get everyone in the school together and work on somebody's issue. We want, rather than an anti-whatever protest, how about a new model awareness day? Pick a new model, have an awareness day. Did you know that you could be driving home in a Jetsons car and never have to deal with traffic again? That's one of my pet peeves. So, I kind of got really serious about that when a couple years ago we were in Southern California going to an event with Coyote at his school, and then while I was there, it was kind of a working thing. I had to drive out past the San Fernando Valley out to Thousand Oaks. And I spent the night and did my work, and the next day I had to come back through the entire LA basin at rush hour traffic with 2 freeways broken and narrowed to 1 lane and every other freeway broken. And what should have been no more than an hour and a half drive took 4.5 hours. 4.5 hours of actual driving. That included the 45 minutes I got off the freeway to eat, just hoping the traffic cleared out a little bit. And I have a short chapter in this book that's going to come out about problems with our transportation system. And I composed at least the outline, if not a lot of the details, while I'm driving. I'm stuck in traffic on the freeway, not moving. Oh, wow, there's a good idea. Oh, well, there's another good idea. So as long as the issue meets the criteria of moving in the direction of the benefit of all beings everywhere, it's positive for humanity and it's positive for the future of the planet. The exact nature of the issue is not important. Feel free to get together and talk about this. In fact, I encourage it. And unlike some homework or tests in school where you're not allowed to collaborate and cheat, I'm encouraging it.
Encouraging cheating or collaboration?
Yeah, cheating means we win. So we're cheating by the standards of the old paradigm. But you and you and you and you and you and you get together and talk about these. So today we're going to talk about Yvonne's issue. The next day we're going to talk about Bonnie's issue.
I have issues.
She said it, I did. Bonnie has issues. But yeah, you're going to pick an issue. The one
Frozen
issue you're
pipes.
most passionate about.
Frozen pipes.
That you're going to be willing to spend a significant amount of effort on in the next few years to increase awareness of a new paradigm, better alternative. And the one ground rule I insist on is no complaining or bashing about the existing model. When the automobile was invented as a new form of transportation, don't forget your water, they weren't complaining about horse and buggies. There's a bunch of nerd guys, equivalent, the late 1800, early 1900 equivalent of Techner geeks getting together and saying, hey, what could I do with this? Oh, it's an engine. It makes a thing go around. Oh, what if I hooked it up to my wagon? It would go faster than with a horse. And that's where everybody's going, oh, yeah, isn't this great? And then you get these crazy bicycle makers. He said, what if I hook it up to a couple bicycle wheels with wings? It's probably the last good invention to come out of Cleveland. Prove me wrong. Send me an email. Wait, I live in Cleveland and I invented whatever. That's where Orville and Wilbur Wright were at. Didn't have enough wind, didn't have enough of the right kind of hills, so they went down to Kitty Hawk in the Carolinas. That's where they started flying planes. But the airplane was a completely radical new direction, right? It didn't replace anything. It didn't replace a thing. Birds are still in business. It was just a quantum leap. That aha moment. And a very short time after Kitty Hawk in 1903, actually the key event came in 1899, was when Robert Goddard had his first aha moment on building rockets. We could have been flying rockets before airplanes if a few other things had gone different. Almost. Just a few years off. He's the guy who invented liquid fuel rockets. He's the quintessential rocket scientist. Everybody says, it ain't rocket scientist. Well, that's because they're comparing it to the standard set by Robert Goddard. My favorite story about Goddard was, he was born around 1880 somewhere. He died right after World War II. He'd had tuberculosis as a kid, and then he died of cancer shortly after the war. And he had invented all this rocket stuff that our government said, nah, we don't want to develop it. But the Nazis got a hold of it and developed it. So they start launching V-2 rockets on London. And after the war, it's like, how did you know how to do that? Well, why are you asking this? Why don't you talk to your own Dr. Goddard? Right? Literally, that was the verbatim quote from Werner von Braun, the key German rocket scientist who came to America and helped us eventually get to the moon. But at the time, they didn't know who Goddard was, even though he worked for the Army. This is a crazy thing. And go talk to him. He published the key classic textbook. I have one in the other room. It's Goddard's textbook on how to build rockets. That was so far beyond anything else. And like any good New England conservative, every time Goddard invented something, he sent it off to the U.S. Patent Office and got it patented. Fast forward in time, Goddard's dead. NASA decides that they have to get to the moon before the Russians, because the Russians will take over the universe. NASA would invent stuff, and they'd go to the patent office, and they'd get a letter back that says, rejected. Sorry, Robert Goddard already invented it. They paid $1 million to Goddard's widow for the right to everything he invented, because she still owned it. They wouldn't have been a space race. We never would have gone anywhere if it hadn't been for them being willing to pay that. And they got off cheap. She could have asked 10 times that.
That's a bargain.
But what she wanted most was credit for Goddard. So inventing the airplane, inventing the rocket, those were quantum leaps because they didn't replace anything. This was just a better model. That's the model that all of you I want to use. What's the better model for your issue that you want to work on? You can do artwork, you can build sculptures, you can write plays, you can blog. Write blogs, get ideas out, get the insulting comments back, and filter through them to see how you can improve what you put out. That's the homework. This is how we're going to change the world. We're creating a new model. And we're going to use every bit of the consciousness training we've had to do this. Pick an issue. I can see wheels turning. I can
There's so
see
many.
smoke coming. Yeah, there are. You know, I've just spent the last 2 or 3 years working on 2 or 3 books, compiling my own thoughts on some of these things. And so that's what's going to happen. Is I'll get these books out and then I'll take the next step. Our goal is awareness and letting people know they have options.
Absolutely.
And then if we can get a groundswell of movement together, you know, we can actually make the changes.
We can create a prototype for the new paradigm.
Communities
Mm-hmm.
is one I may be working on next. Modern applications of the Tolteca Yotl philosophy is the one I'm currently working on. So I got that one. I claim that one.
I might improve on your model.
Good. What I was about to say is I'm working on that one, so everybody else can too if you want.
There you
Or at
go.
least a part of it.
There's the collaboration and
Look
cheating.
at what the Tolteca Yotl philosophy is, so remember that spirituality and spiritual transcendence is the objective. I mean, how many hundreds of things could you come out of just that? And then the first ground floor is food and farming production. How many ways could we improve that? The next step up is healthcare. How many ways can we improve that? How many ways can we improve education? How can we improve social order and justice?
Yeah, we were
True
talking
freedom.
about at the dinner. We were some of us were talking about the food waste.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
a
the
huge
homeless.
pet peeve. We waste more food than it takes to feed everybody in the world who's starving. A blog or two ago, can't remember exactly which one, I basically said we don't have a food production problem, we have a logistics and transportation problem.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was Karen's son who mentioned the fire camps that they have to throw the food out. Remember?
Oh yeah, that's just asinine. Here's some food that didn't get eaten, and you've got starving people right there. Here. Oh no, it could have bacteria. Let them starve. Bacteria might kill them, so let them die of death starvation. I'll throw a little vitamin C in there with it, and then the bacteria won't matter.
Some ginger.
What's that?
Put some ginger in there.
With ginger.
Ginger.
Ginger, yeah. So, the Toltec consciousness tools you should use, make planning this and executing this a spiritual operation. Create a sacred space, like a temple, clean it, purify it energetically and spiritually. Have the material you're going to work with, whether you're going to type, whether you're going to write, draw, make clay, statue, whatever. However it's going to start. Invoke the Akadwa, invoke your connections to your highest guides, to your holy guardian angel, to the highest thing you can envision. Give yourself a block of time without interruptions, and then do it. Yeah, I mean, the Tolteca Yotl, I mean, there's hundreds of possibilities in that. If you can't just look at just that alone and come up with half a dozen ideas that you're passionate about and willing to work on, then you're not trying very hard. And I mean that. And the whole spiritual order of the universe, that spiritual transcendence, what could humanity look like? There's so many good possibilities there. Anybody have any questions on that?
Is that something like nationwide, worldwide, or does it have to be in our community?
Yes.
Okay.
Back in the 1960s, and some of us lived through them and survived, there was a bumper sticker that said, "Think globally, act locally."
I remember that.
Good stuff. So, I might have the greatest idea in the world to change farming in India, but I don't know anybody in India. Implementing that's going to be tough for me. So think globally, act locally. But if you have the connections and you can pull it off, there's no limits. Pull it off. Yeah.
So Sarah asks, what if my issue has to do with improvements that I want to see within the school? And then Maria added, can it just be an improvement and not an issue?
But I thought if the old model's not working, we have to invent a new model.
Right. So it is kind of like
we're not trying to fix the old.
Right.
We're creating the new.
Yeah.
Right.
What I will tell you is if you have a question or there's something in our school that you want to see change or improve, come talk to me. You know, my goal is to present information and to help each of you make the connections with your holy guardian angel. And towards that end, I teach certain skills, techniques, and disciplines that will work. They will get you there. These techniques are ancient. They've been used for hundreds of thousands of years to train initiates. And if you apply yourself, they will work. And if you have questions, suggestions, complaints, that's okay. I'm happy to hear all of that. Come talk to me. Schedule a meeting. I prefer those be one-on-one, face-to-face. And I encourage everyone in the school to set up a meeting with me monthly. Now, those people who live far away, like Mount Shasta or Wisconsin, you know, it might be hard to get face-to-face, so I might be willing to have a phone consult or a Zoom or video thing on the machine here and have the meeting that way. That's fine. But if you're really serious, if you're in Southern Oregon or Northern California, make the effort to find a time and we'll get together and we'll meet. What I can tell you is the techniques works, and if you think they're not working, go back and read rule number 1. Because if you're doing these techniques, they will work. And there's always ways of applying and changing and modifying things to a unique situation. The way that my teacher and benefactor, Koyuka Blind, worked with me is very different than he worked with Bonnie, which is very different than he worked with his brother Bruto, which is very different than the way he works with Charla or Gregory or any of the other students. With George Oso, the guy who runs the sweat lodge, he works with each of us differently, yet exactly the same. The milestones we're going for are identical. The path may be slightly different, but it works. I know where the path goes. and it works. Now, regarding an improvement, which was Maria's question.
Well, the improvement was used in Sarah's question, so I'm not sure if they're related or not.
What was Maria said again? Read it to me, please.
Can it just be an improvement and not an issue? And I think that Yvonne answered that is if we're improving the old model, then we're not really rethinking something new.
You can't think too big in this exercise. You can't think too grandiose. It is possible to think too small. Very definitely possible to under-aim. This is a blank canvas we're talking about. Totally a blank canvas. What do you want the world to look like?
I like you using the pyramid of the adult type of way as a guideline though, because it breaks it down in each.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the whole universe, but clearly that meets all the needs for survival. And in fact, I'd go beyond. It meets not just needs to survive, but to thrive. And it gives us the purpose of why we should be doing any of it.
So the interesting thing is, after the dinner, Saturday night I was driving home, and I was struck very deeply with the idea that the people involved in the Akatawa, in this university, it would be so amazing to have an intentional community. And especially as you talked about, you know, these kids that kind of came through, well, their intentions aren't really the same as the intentions this school and this community intends to bring forth in the world. But it would be such an amazing think tank to help bring all this new into being. It would be the prototype for what communities could be. It's so funny that you talk about this now, because it just was so heavy on my heart.
I was struck by Coyote saying a revolution. So this is the revolution.
Yeah.
And it is game on.
Big time.
We're past dress rehearsal. This is opening night. Okay, to use a theater analogy. Yes.
Can I share about that talk that Quilty did about?
Switch the gizmo, please. Please do.
Okay, so basically, I was working at UC Riverside at the time, and students on campus, particularly the ones that had Central American heritage, were talking about revolution, and they wanted to use that terminology to get better treatment as students, better things for themselves as a group at the university. And so Coyote heard about that, and he arranged to have be there as a guest lecturer at the university. And I don't know that the students involved were directly in the audience, but the idea was to address their position about revolution. And it's a very inspiring talk. I believe it's still on his YouTube feed somewhere if you scroll down enough. And essentially what he was saying is revolution is not to better your circumstances. Revolution is for the generations to come.
Yes.
And that we may lose our lives, that our lives might be drastically changed in an effort to create a better world for the future, for posterity. And for someone who has actually been directly involved and impacted by revolution, he was a political refugee from his country. He saw you know, all sorts of horrors and attacks, you know, by his own government on his own people. You know, and his
Death
family had to run away for their lives. For him to have that approach after, you know, he would have every reason to take that kind of treatment personally and have all sorts of reasons for being able to engage in revolution for personal revenge or personal issues. But he took his time out to go and address these students to say, this isn't about you and your schooling.
Mm-hmm.
A revolution is something that you've committed to, and that you're going to do this not for yourself, but for humanity.
Mhm.
So, as part of that lecture, he showed video that had been shot during one of the massacres in El Salvador, where he himself was in the crowd being shot at. And it wasn't zoomed in on him, but it was the event when he was young, I think 14. And his father was there, his older brother was there, and hundreds and hundreds of people there. Many were killed. And this was news footage from that incident. And I think, if I remember watching that correctly, he pointed out, you see this thing here? I'm hiding behind that. Or something like that. He pointed out, okay, this is what revolution is. And you have to be committed, and you have to be all in. And I don't know very many people who are happy with very many things in our world right now. A lot of things, but there's some things, I mean, you know, we keep moving up the ladder, we keep moving up. I'm happy with the Acadwa, I'm happy with this consciousness tool. I'm happy with the progress that Coyote School and our school is starting to make. I'm happy with the people in this school who lived in paradise and lost everything. And on their way out the door, they grabbed the Toltec Survivor and EJ's ABD as two of the last books they took out on their way out, and that they're still doing the work. So, it's time for the next step. That's what's next. And so read 1984. In parallel with reading all the other books. And in parallel with starting your own process, and feel free to get together and compare notes and collaborate and cheat together. This is a take-home quiz you can cheat on.
Open book.
Open book, cheat all you want. All encouraged.
Do you even know how to cheat?
Know what?
Know how to cheat?
It's going to be a tough one for me. I'll figure it out. I know how to collaborate.
So that's what's next, is we need to be moving forward and creating the new model, not fixing the old one. Any other questions? No questions? Okay,
Can I just say this is so exciting?
Oh,
Good.
This is incredible.
It's great.
apparently Brennan has a question.
This is great. Instead of bitch about something, take action, create a new
Hey
model.
Stellan, where you going? Come on over. What'd you say?
Went back in the room. Maybe didn't make up for this.
I don't know if you heard him. He said apparently Brennan has a question.
All right,
We'll get it in the dreaming, Brennan.
if there's no questions, we're going to stop there because you need a little more time to start your homework. Okay? Thank you. Do good, avoid evil. Good.